Venezuela, hundreds of citizens gathered in the streets in the capital city, Caracas, to celebrate International Workers' Day. In France, dozens of people were injured during the protests against the pension reform imposed by the president Emmanuel Macron. And also, Sudanese authorities reported a serious deterioration of the health system as clashes persist between the national army and the paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces. Hello from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Venezuela, hundreds of citizens gathered in the streets of the capital city, Caracas, to celebrate International Workers' Day. The mobilization was led by the President Nicolás Maduro Moros and several high-ranking officials of the national government. During the meeting, the Venezuelan president denounced the seizure by the United States of Citgo, the largest subsidiary of state-owned PDVSA outside Venezuelan territory. The head of state also announced a series of economic measures aimed at combating unilateral sanctions and the economic war for the benefit of the Venezuelan working class. During the mobilization, the president also denounced that the United States has handed over the management of the Venezuelan company Citgo to a sector of the opposition gathered in the so-called unitary platform.
Today, the U.S. government issued a resolution handing over the Venezuelan company Citgo to some people from the opposition of the unitary platform of Venezuela. They issued a resolution without notice, an unworthy resolution that is a direct message of betrayal. They have decided to give Citgo to a group of unknown people, supposedly the directive of the former National Assembly, which no longer exists in our Venezuela. People that none of you, none of us know, that live abroad, that fled like rats at the time, and the government of the United States issues a resolution giving them Citgo to sell and to do with Citgo whatever they want.
In other topics, the president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, participated on Monday in a union event for May the 1st in Sao Paulo, in which he confirmed a minimum wage adjustment and the tax benefits for workers, two campaign promises. Lula stated before an audience convened by the main trade union confederations that he signed a decree that raises the minimum wage for workers, retirees, and pensioners to about $265. This represents an increase of just $3.61 compared to the current value sent in December by the former President Jair Bolsonaro, but resumes a policy of real wage valorization, which in addition to inflation will be adjusted based on the GDP, according to the government. The president also confirmed his promise to increase the minimum amount exempt from income tax, which went on Monday from around $380 to $529, equivalent to 2 minimum wages. At the event, Lula also defended wage parity between men and women and the improvement of labor rights for those who work for digital applications.
We have once again instituted a real increase in the minimum wage above inflation. From now on, in addition to inflation, the worker will receive the average GDP growth. For the first time, we will truly guarantee that women must earn the same salary as men if they have the same job. without ifs and buts. I want to prove to you that in these next 4 years, we will do much more than I did in my first 8 years in office. And I will do it because of my commitment to the working people.
In Colombia, people went to the streets to celebrate International Workers' Day and support labor reforms promoted by the President Gustavo Petro. In a speech before hundreds of people from the balcony of the Casa de Nariño, the President called for the defense of the labor reform that his government presented to the Congress to reduce the working day and recover workers' stability. Also, Petro invited the working people to be part of the front line of the struggle for the transformations of Colombia and the vanguard of progressivism to promote labor reforms and living wages. In addition, the head of state affirmed that his government wants an unbreakable alliance with the working people to defend the interests of the population.
This labor reform is one of the key reforms for the changing times in Colombia. What is being proposed here is nothing more and nothing less to reduce the working day, a struggle that gave rise to this day, a struggle of North American workers, most of them immigrants at that time, from Ireland, Italy, workers who settled there in the United States and were killed because they did not want to see the working people raise the flag of dignity.
In this sense, President Gustavo Petro also assured that the people must remain mobilized in the face of the interests of restricting the reforms proposed by his administration.
Before, in many pseudo-intellectual analyses, people used to say whether it was the reform or the revolution. It seems to me that they go hand in hand. Reforms can lead to a revolution. The attempt to restrict reforms can lead to a revolution. What is needed, in any case, is people to be mobilized as they were with Bolívar, as they were with Melo, as they were with López Pumarejo and Gaitán.
Let's take a short break. But first, remember you can follow us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Uruguayan workers carry out several activities for labor demands within the framework of the commemoration of the International Workers' Day. Summoned by the Inter-Union Plenary of Workers, the National Convention of Workers, popularly known as the PIT-CNT, the Uruguayans gathered at the Martyrs of Chicago Square under the slogan, "Today as yesterday, the working class will not fail." Along with this event, Uruguayans commemorated 50 years of the heroic general strike, with which the workers confronted the dictatorship that governed the country between the 70s and the 80s of the last century. The commemoration is linked to the current issues of concern to the Uruguayan working class, in particular the recently approved pension reform by the parliament. Monday's mobilization was a prelude to the convening of the round of wage and accountability councils, negotiation instruments between the government, the business sector, and the unions. In Argentina, social and trade union organizations celebrate Workers' Day with demonstrations. One of the activities was held at the Ministry of Social Development in Buenos Aires City. At the event, the Evita movement, together with other social and trade union organizations, rejected the policies imposed by the International Monetary Fund on the country. They also called to prioritize the agenda of the working class and to maintain the unity of the workers in order to defend their rights.
This day is very important for the workers, for Peronists like us, and at the same time, it is also very important to address the issue of the adjustment, the recipe that the government has been applying. The most important thing today is to put workers' demands on the agenda. The society nor the government recognize us as workers. There was always an idea that these sectors were not workers, but rather that they were beneficiaries of social plans. And that is not the case. So we have been building work in all the activities of the country, and it was very important to generate that activity today that give us that framework of union with the great majority of the popular movements.
In Chile, several demonstrations were held in the capital city to mark International Workers' Day. Among the demonstrations that was called by the Central Unitaria de Trabajadores, the CUT, among other governmental organizations, which was attended by different authorities of the government of President Gabriel Boric. At the same time, in the western zone of Santiago, the March of the Central Clasista, called by members of the opposition, took place, which concluded with a repression by the police force. In this context, it was known that despite the outcome, both demonstrations had been authorized. And the Ecuadorian cities of Quito, Guayaquil, Cuenca, Esmeraldas, Puyo, Azogues, among others, experienced today massive mobilizations, and yesterday too, of workers demanding better working conditions and measures against insecurity. The United Workers Front and other trade union and social organizations called on the working class and the people to raise their voices, also to demand the departure of President Guillermo Lasso for considering his inefficient management of the most pressing problems of the population. Among the demands of this International Workers' Day in the marches held in Ecuador was also the demand for measures to contain insecurity in the country. War assaults, murders, extortion, robberies, kidnappings, and other crimes are becoming more and more frequent. In France, dozens of people were injured during the repression of protests against the pension reform imposed by President Emmanuel Macron. Previously, the Ministry of the Interior acknowledged of social networks that the vast majority of the people who took to the streets on International Workers' Day did so peacefully. According to preliminary figures from the authorities, the most violent events took place in the capital and in the cities of Lyon and Nantes, in the context of the protests called by the trade unions. In Nantes, some 30 people were injured and one protester was hospitalized with serious injuries and hand injuries. In Nigeria, workers rallied on Monday, May the 1st, like fellow counterparts across the world, to mark International Workers' Day. In Lagos, large crowds gathered at the Mobolaji Johnson Arena. This year's celebration takes place against the backdrop of the cost of living crisis. As Nigeria's leader, Muhammadu Buhari, prepares to hand over the baton of the government to President-elect Bola Tinubu, unions call for a reduction of poverty, saying the economic situation is precarious, and everybody is expecting the government to try to alleviate the situation and make it better. Workers also called on the government to prioritize infrastructure and electricity, as well as the welfare of its people. Labor unions also renew calls for worker-friendly policies. Moreover, in a message posted on the president-elect's Twitter account on Monday, he promised that workers will have more than a minimum wage. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Sudan, on Tuesday, authorities reported a serious deterioration of the health system as the clashes persist between the National Army and the paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces. The Union of Doctors of Sudan in the city of Al Geneina and the capital of the state of West Darfur said on Tuesday that in the midst of a total collapse of the health situation, they had been able to count 94 dead so far, while hundreds of people have been injured as a result of the fighting. They also said that health facilities were attacked and looted, as well as camps for displaced persons. On the other hand, the United Nations estimates that up to 800,000 civilians may flee Sudan and seek protection in a neighboring country in the coming weeks as fighting continues, which in 2 weeks has already forced more than 100,000 people to flee. Convening in Egypt, in Cairo, Arab League permanent members held on Monday, May the 1st, an emergency meeting on the fighting in Sudan. Egypt's deputy permanent representative outlined a draft resolution to halt fighting in the neighboring country. Egypt calls within the draft resolution for an immediate and comprehensive cessation of the conflict, Ubaida El-Dandarawi said. Officially, at least 528 people have been killed and almost 4,600 people wounded in the violence between the army and Sudan's paramilitary group RSF. Despite the formal extension of a truce, fierce fighting raged on Monday between Sudan's warring sides. Some 50,000 people have fled, seeking refuge in neighboring countries, including Egypt, the Central African Republic, and Chad. Moreover, top UN humanitarian official Martin Griffiths lamented the exponential rise of the costs of transportation out of the war's hit areas.
Egypt proposes a draft resolution based on Statement number 252 as part of a series of successive steps through which Egypt is moving at the regional, international, and bilateral levels. Egypt calls for an immediate and comprehensive cessation of conflict and for all parties to initiate their efforts to give priority to the Sudanese people and stop bloodshed, which is a prerequisite for returning to political dialogue through which the crisis can be resolved comprehensively.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.